Hello, and welcome to the Three Questions podcast, where we dive deep into the world of wealth management and connect you with industry experts. I'm your host, Wayne Baxter, Senior Executive Manager at One Capital Management. If you or someone close to you are selling an asset with a capital gain of $1 million or more and want to defer the capital gains tax payment on the sale of any asset, stay tuned. We're going to address the three questions to ask before implementing a deferred sales trust. Thank you for taking time to check us out. And if you enjoy this episode of the Three Questions podcast, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our YouTube channels. On today's episode, we'll be addressing the three questions to ask before implementing a deferred sales trust. It is a very powerful tax strategy. For anyone selling an asset with substantial capital gains, this tool can be a game changer. Our guest today is Calabasas, California-based Ben Levine. He is the president and CEO of DST Advisors, Inc. They specialize in managing deferred sales trusts, and Ben brings a deep expertise to the table, and he's here to help us out, educate and inform us, and understand how a deferred sales trust can help you defer capital gains tax for as long as you want. Ben, great to see you. Been wanting to do this for a while now. Thank you for making time to join us.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. Great to be here. Love doing these educational type deals. It's important to educate the public, and I love being part of it. So thanks
Yeah,
for having
and what we're going to try to do here is provide some education, try to be informative, provide some clarity, maybe a little bit of guidance, and I'm really happy to be able to connect you with all my clients and all my friends and colleagues across the United States and Canada. So this is great. Now we're going to be covering the three questions to ask before implementing a deferred sales trust. But first, why don't you just take a couple minutes to tell us a little bit about your firm, DST Advisors? Just kind of give us sort of a historical background, just a high-level overview of who you are and all of that.
Sounds great. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, DST Advisors, Inc. is an authorized and approved trustee for these transactions. Every transaction requires an independent trustee. So that's our role in the transaction, including, going out and educating people about the structure and working with other financial professionals. So that's our company. My partner is a CPA, been in practice for 40 years, a practicing CPA. So that's an additional great value. So we've both been in business for 30 years. We got some gray hair and been around for a long time.
You and me both.
Yeah, exactly. I live in Westlake Village. I've grown up here in SoCal and Encino and not too far away, so I didn't move too far. But it's a great community, and Craig and I have a really nice practice and love working with clients and other professionals. So
And
that's
you're
us.
able to work with clients all over the U.S.
Yes, yeah, we've done deals across the nation, even though we're in California. So we've got people all over the nation.
Well, listen, yeah, we're going to be discussing the three questions to ask before implementing the deferred sales trust. Now, again, this conversation is packed with valuable information, so let's dive right in. No reason to wait. Let's get to question number one. And again, we're going to ask these questions from the lens of someone who has significant capital gains built into their assets, and they're asking the question. So, question number one is, how does a deferred sales trust help me defer capital gains taxes, and what are the long-term benefits? Ben, take it away.
Great question. The one that everyone should be asking. So the deferred sales trust defers capital gains taxes through the use of a specialized installment sale. That's in Code Section 453, IRS code. In addition to the specialized installment sale, it does require a third-party independent trustee. So that's what makes things work. And of course, DST Advisors is that third-party trustee.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happening is, the owner is selling an asset to the trust and taking back a note. And that note is fully secured by the assets in the trust. So they now have a note that's fully secured, and but yet they haven't taken possession of the money, right, from the sale, so hence they haven't paid any taxes. So the IRS says if you haven't taken possession, you don't have to pay any tax yet. And there's a lot of, I think, great benefits that people appreciate when we think about taking the benefits. In other words, when do I take my money from the sale? One of the benefits is the flexibility of the deferred sales trust. A seller, remember that, so they're the seller, the owner, and now they're a note holder, right? That's that installment sale. The trust owes them the money. And now it's totally up to that note holder to decide, when and how much they want to take. So the note holder decides, do I want to take just interest on my note and not pay any capital gains tax? A lot of sellers do that, at least for a while. Or the seller could say, hey, maybe I just need, I need $50,000 a month to live the lifestyle I want to live.
Mhm.
So they just give us a dollar amount, and then, part of that would be interest income to them, right, from the note, and the balance would be part of that capital gain. So now they're spreading out the gain over many years. So that flexibility for them to decide, when they want to start, how much they want to take is really, really nice when you're doing, planning for people. So that's a great benefit. Another great benefit is just the liquidity and diversification. A lot of people, they're going from owning maybe one asset, whether that's an apartment building or a business, um, owning one asset to a diversified portfolio of marketable securities, right? So talk about mitigating risk. Instead of owning one asset, now
Now
I own
you're
diversified.
talking my language now. That's for
There you go.
certain.
I knew you'd get excited about that. So, but when we think about mitigating risk, when we think about liquidity, all of these things, it's really, really nice. So now I've got this portfolio of securities that's easily liquid, and we can adapt to different environments. So that's really nice. I think that's a nice benefit. Um, the other is just the ongoing tax deferral, right? Our notes are 10-year notes. So we start with that 10-year time horizon, and they can have deferral the first 10 years, and then they can renew the note at the end of 10 and continue the deferral.
You could
So
just keep rotating these through and potentially for 20, 30 years if you wanted to.
exactly, yeah.
All
So
right.
that's really nice. So ongoing tax deferral, and the ability to spread out those taxes or pay them in the better years, you know, paying them with discounted dollars in the future. So that's really nice, that ongoing tax deferral. The other nice thing is a lot of people that use our trust are in those retirement years. They're tired, they're ready to sell the business.
They're financially independent, in other words.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? They would just want to simplify life.
Mhm.
Like a lot of your clients, right? Hey, I don't want to manage the real estate anymore. I've had many people say, I want to get out of the trash and toilets business. I just want to live the lifestyle I want. I want to travel. I want to have fun. I don't want to have to worry about all this stuff. So, um, you know, when they're in those income years, ready to start taking distributions, because we haven't paid the taxes, right? We've deferred that tax payment. So we've kept that wealth in the trust. So because we have more money in the trust, there's more income generated typically, right? So enhanced retirement income, instead of me giving up that money I would have had to write the check for it to the IRS and the governor, that stays in the trust invested, and and usually pays a higher income right to them. So that's really nice. Um, Another benefit, we rescue a lot of 1031s. So if somebody is
That actually puts me into my next question, actually.
okay,
Exactly, right? Was
yeah,
how does, and question number two here for Ben Levine is, how does the deferred sales trust compare to other tax deferral strategies? I have friends that, offer, as a 1031 exchange as a strategy, or there's another one, the Delaware Statutory Trust, right?
yep, yes,
Interesting, DST as well, but
right. Unfortunately, the same acronym.
yeah,
Yeah.
But
Oh well.
basically, from the context of cost, risk, benefits, like how does the deferred the strategy that you offer,
Yeah.
uh, how do they compare?
Well, that's a great point. And it's nice to do some comparisons, but I don't want to come off like I'm trying to discredit the 1031s or the Delaware. They each have their place, and there isn't one solution that's perfect for everybody, right?
Hmm.
So, it's important to simply know about the differences, and that's what we try to do. How does it compare? Well, when we think about a 1031 or a Delaware, there's only certain assets you can use those for, right?
Right.
So one of the nice things about the deferred sales trust is that we can use our structure for any type of asset sale. We've done everything from businesses, everything from a financial practice like yours, we've actually done to automobile dealerships. We've got a dental practice right now. We're doing an auto repair, a ton of real estate. So, and even artwork. We've done artwork where somebody has a big gain and they're selling it. So we can do, I mean, crypto, you name it, anything with a capital gain, we can use our structure for, which is really nice. So that separates us immediately from some of these other alternatives. I think another benefit different from some of these other than the 1031 than the Delaware is that we offer some true diversification, right? I mean, in a Delaware, you're going
From
maybe you're
real estate to real estate, essentially.
right. I mean, and you could argue that you're diversifying into different real estate projects, different sponsors, which I get, and that's true.
But it's still the asset class of real estate.
That's the thing. You're still in that same asset class, right? You're just in different properties.
Hmm.
Um, with us, if people are comfortable with it, they're going into a diversified, portfolio of marketable securities. So I think that's a nice benefit, especially if somebody has all their other assets in real estate. What a nice diversification. Let's have part of our money in something different than real estate, right? And again, so that's I think a nice benefit. And another benefit would be if I think about 1031s, what's the biggest challenge there? The 45-day identification period, right? So you're dealing with these timelines of 45 days and 180 days with a 1031 exchange, and you can't always find a good deal. I just had a financial advisor call me from Iowa, said, he's got a client selling 7 grocery stores and he wants to do a 1031 into a lousy apartment building. And they're doing it simply for the tax deferral, knowing it's a bad deal. And he's saying, I think it's such a foolish move. And when he learned about our structure, he said, "Wow, this is so awesome. They can go from," and they don't even know anything about apartment buildings, right? So they're used to grocery stores, and now they're jumping into an asset class they're really not familiar with. So his idea is, hey, let's
Talk
get
about
into this,
risk.
right? I mean, talk about risk. So the idea of diversification and not dealing with these timelines. When you're in a 1031, of course, you've got to identify in 45 days. And that's, when it's a good time to sell, it's not always a good time to buy. And so people are buying and doing a 1031 simply to get the tax deferral, and too often they get into a bad investment, which is lousy. So we don't have those time constraints, which is really nice. Um, I would, the deferred sales trust does require an independent trustee. So, some of these other structures do not. Of course, the Delaware has a sponsor that controls everything. So you have zero control and zero say in a Delaware. That's good for someone that just wants that passive income, doesn't want to think about anything or know about anything. Just give me my check every month. In our structure, it's much more transparent. It's much more flexible. It's much more liquid. So, those are some of the differences. Let me think if I can think of anything else. We talked about liquidity. Obviously, that's a big issue.
Huge.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have liquidity, right?
Yeah, you can't eat a house, right?
Yeah, and you can't, you can't.
Putting it simple, pretty hard if you got all your assets in this one inert object. It's pretty hard to you
Yeah,
know unless it has an ATM built into it, right? So,
Exactly. Right. So,
right.
so that liquidity and the control is nice. So I would say that would be some of the differences that I think of off the top of my head between those different structures. Again, they're not bad. They just have, different things that they offer. And when people understand the difference, um, they can choose.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think you've done an excellent job. You know, I knew this was going to happen, that, you were going to respond to my questions and they were going to provoke other questions. And that has happened here. Before we get to some additional follow-up questions, I do have one more, and I think we've talked about it a bit, but I just want to clarify. So question number three, the three questions you should ask before implementing a deferred sales trust. Question number three, we have Ben Levine with us here again, providing us some really good clarity today. Question number three, Ben, is what types of investments can I make through deferred sales trusts, and how flexible are my options? And you can even add in to that if there are any things that don't qualify as well, if you want to
okay.
add that in.
Okay, great. And that's another great question. What can we invest in? So we've got the proceeds in the trust, and now those proceeds need to be invested. Because remember, we owe the seller a note. We owe them that interest. We need to start paying them. So we hire a professional like you to put together an asset allocation, and we can invest in anything. There's zero limitations with regard to our trust. So there's no like kind issues. We can invest in anything that note holder is comfortable with, because the entire asset allocation is built around their risk tolerance, not
Mhm.
DST advisors, not yours, but the seller's risk tolerance, because they're the creditor now looking over the transaction with creditor rights. So we can't do anything, and we don't want to do anything unless they approve it. So we would get the risk tolerance from that seller by asking them some risk tolerance questions,
Just
risk
like we
tolerance.
would naturally ask, right? And
Right. Same thing you guys
precisely.
ask every new client, what are you comfortable with? From that, you would design the allocation, and then that allocation would be approved by the seller note holder. But literally, we can invest in anything. Now, what do we want to invest in? Again, we want to be diversified. We want to mitigate risk. We want investments that are going to produce the income that we need to pay that note interest. But literally could be anything from ETFs to crypto. We haven't invested in
So
any crypto.
alternative investments,
Yep.
real property, obviously, private credit,
Yep.
private equity, those sorts of things all qualify.
All qualify. And that's the beauty of this, is that, again, the flexibility to invest in anything. Even, we'll get back to our real estate example. Hey, I was selling this real estate. It was a great time to sell, but not a good time to buy right now. So instead of forcing me into a deal that I don't want, let's get into this diversified portfolio, sit back for a year or two, and when I find that right real estate investment, when I find that good deal that I'm used to finding, then we get back into real estate. And
Right.
and
I would
that's
I would say to that though, you want to be pretty short term if that's the time horizon. You're probably looking at primarily short term fixed income if that time horizon is that short. But yeah, I see that. That makes sense.
Yeah, so we can
Um,
get back into real estate, and it's even nice because when we get back into real estate with the proceeds and the trust, we actually start a new depreciation schedule. So that's nice instead of carrying over the old schedule with a 1031. So anything we have a guy selling a auto repair business in Florida for $9 million, and he's using our structure, and he said, "Hey, I want to buy another business down the road, but I want to wait until I find the right one." We can do that with the proceeds in the trust. We take it out, so we do it a little bit differently, but we can do it. So that's really, really nice.
Interesting. Well, listen, I told you I had a couple follow-up questions, and the first one, and it refers back to a conversation I had probably 2 years ago with a CPA, and it was regarding some other tax strategy. It wasn't the DST, it was another tax strategy that basically would ultimately the proceeds would end up into a type of trust where the owner is giving up complete control. And, I remember talking to a CPA about the benefits of this particular strategy, and his comment was, if you want to, if you can defer tax by giving up control of an asset, but when you give up control to the asset, you have no control over it. In other words, you run the risk of someone else making decisions about this asset that you wouldn't agree with. So I guess the question I would ask, and just as a follow up, is because what I've heard from you is that even though you play the role of the trustee, it sounds to me like a fairly passive relationship between you and the seller of that, the owner of the now note. So in other words, if they come back to you and say, 4 or 5 years down the road, I know I initially set this up for a long-term investment strategy, but I've changed my mind. You as the trustee cannot put the brakes on their change of heart.
Yeah, well, we wouldn't want to, right? If somebody wants to cash in 5 years, why would we argue against them?
Right. I'm just using it as a hypothetical answer. In
Yeah,
other words, what I'm getting at, as the trustee, you can't freeze out the initial owner of the assets from doing what they want to do, because it's always obviously a concern is, I've
no.
given up.
Well, what the seller note holder has is creditor rights. So
Right.
remember, they've gone from seller owner to now creditor. They're the lender, they're the bank. So just like the bank on your mortgage, you can't
Right.
sell your property without the bank being paid off and without
Of
the note,
course. Of
right?
course.
So like I said, we design everything around the note holder seller. So
Right.
the risk tolerance, the investments, we can't invest anything unless the seller approves it. And that's the way we want it. We want them to be
Perfect.
informed. And
Perfect.
what some sellers will do is they'll say, "Hey, pay me interest only," and then they'll call us in year 4 and say, my CPA told me, let's say they're getting interest only and not paying any capital gains tax yet. They'll call us in year 4 or 5 and say, my CPA told me I have this other capital loss this year. And if I take $2 million of that sale this year, I'm not going to pay any capital gains tax because of that loss. Well,
Hmm.
what we can do is we can modify the note because a bank modifies notes. So we do just what the bank would. We would modify the note and say, we're going to make a $2 million distribution, pay you back 2 million of principal this year, and then, continue the note from there. So, the nice thing is we can modify the note in the future. Of course, we can't do that every 6 months. You can't call us and say we want to change the note. The IRS wouldn't like that. But that the sellers have creditor rights, and that note is fully secured by the proceeds in the trust. So that's really important, and nothing can be done without the seller's approval. The other nice thing is, like if the custodian is somebody like Schwab, we can give them view only access. They can log on 24/7, look to see exactly what's in the trust account, investment account, what it's earning. So while they don't have direct control, because if they did, they'd have to pay the tax. The IRS would say that's a scam,
Exactly. That's the key
right?
of going through the trustee.
Right. So the key is that third party trustee. The key is, the creditor rights. It's the note is fully secured. We can't do anything without their approval. So all of that is really important to them for them feeling good and knowing that their money is safe. Now, I think like any one of these alternatives we talked about, whether it's a Delaware in real estate, whether it's another property that you're owning and managing in a 1031, or a portfolio of securities, they can all lose value. So that I would say is really the risk in all of these transactions is that asset value.
Hmm.
Now, I would argue if I have a diversified portfolio that's marketable, the odds of that being to going to zero is pretty low, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you could tell me better than
Well,
I
yeah,
could.
yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, nobody can predict the future, but you put together a typical balanced investment portfolio and you maintain that strategy over a 10-year period, the odds are pretty good that, you'll get the outcome you had anticipated probably within 100 basis points.
There you go. Right. So we've
No
got
guarantees of anything, of course, right?
no
Past
guarantees.
performance is no guarantee of future results, as they like to say, but
But that's really the risk in these transactions, and we share that with all of these different structures, right? But
mhm.
when we have that diversification, I think we're mitigating that quite a bit, which is nice. So that seller has creditor approval on everything. Nothing can be done without them. And if year five they call and say, "Hey, DST advisors, I just want to cash in," we're never going to say no. Why would we ever do that? Why would we risk the other 100 deals that we're doing to, not give them back their money? So we're happy to do that. People don't do that. What they do is at the end of the 10 years, they want to renew and defer for another 10 years. And they want to take advantage of those special years where we can maybe make a principal distribution. Um, this is all of, and what happens at the end, their heirs inherit the note. So this is, they can go on and receive these note payments for many, many years. And when they pass, their heirs inherit the note. And now they get that income. So what a great way to provide income to the next generation that maybe isn't familiar with the business or isn't good at managing real estate. It's easy to, you know what I mean?
100%. It's a perfect strategy. And again, because we know that usually the second and third generations typically have no interest in the patriarch or matriarch's mode of business. We see that rarely often the case.
Yeah.
One other question on the tax thing that I want on the tax strategy. So you mentioned, obviously there's the capital gain that's built in. That's why they're obviously doing this. We talked about at the beginning of the program, somebody with $1 million or more in capital gains, and they're trying to, stem the bleeding, if they will, before they, liquidate the asset. So you mentioned about, once the DST is set up, the disbursement obviously is defined as income. So that's taxable income at their own tax rate. Is that correct? In other words,
Right. Well, there's two parts to it typically. One is that interest income from the note at ordinary income tax rates.
right,
So they're getting that. And then if they are taking some principal, that's subject to capital gains tax.
right.
So, but obviously when we're spreading that out over 10 or 20 years, we can manage tax brackets. We can
Is there
simply,
a possibility of getting return of capital? Is that not part of the equation? In other words, there's no return of capital option, meaning you have the own, you're not taxed on your own money, so there's no way of return of capital on the asset.
no, no.
Okay, I was just
So,
curious about that.
yeah, it's either, yeah, I mean, the one thing that, yeah, so there's a couple things that we can't solve with the deferred sales trust. One is mortgage over basis. So sometimes people have property, that they bought at a great price, they refied and pulled money out. We can't solve that mortgage over basis with our structure, but you know what we do? We use a Delaware statutory trust to solve the mortgage over basis. And we do that in a very leveraged way. If we're trying to solve $1 million of mortgage over basis, we can do that for 15 cents on the dollar. So somebody putting up
Nuts.
150,000 into a Delaware solves $1 million of mortgage over basis. So that's really, really nice. There's also a way for us to potentially pull money out ahead of time and not pay any tax if we have a little bit of time before the sale. I won't get into that now, but that is a possibility. Because remember, we can take out up to basis without any tax consequence. So that's really, really nice. There's a lot of really cool things to do. We have another structure called our DST Plus that we use for some bigger transactions. And in that structure, we're actually taking the asset completely outside their taxable estate, which is another huge benefit if somebody has, a very high net worth client. So there's some cool, estate planning things we can do. We're all about helping people keep their wealth longer, creating options for the future because, we don't know what the future is going to bring. And
All right,
as a
that makes
planner, so I always start every meeting when someone calls with, hey, what are your goals in selling this asset? What are you trying to accomplish? And obviously working with people like yourself, who's often already familiar with the client. It's nice to have that team together.
you know Yeah, to me, this sounds so compelling. Um, okay, before we wrap up, I actually have a couple questions. One of them is on, we talked at the beginning of the program about $1 million of capital gains or more. Is that kind of, in your view, kind of the trip line and anything above 1 million? Or if someone came to me and said they get a property that's worth the gain was 750, 850, like, does that still, in your view, qualify, or should it be 1 million or more?
Our kind of guideline is we want $1 million of taxable gain. So, if they're selling their personal residence and they have a half a million, it would be 1.5 million of gain because they're already, getting that half a million.
Right.
Now, if you came to me when said, "Hey Ben, I've got somebody with 850,000 that's subject to tax," I would certainly want to talk about it. It's not a hard rule. It's just a guideline.
Understood. I thought so. I
Most,
just wanted to double check.
yeah, great question. We want to be a resource to people like you and other sellers and talk through the situation. We've done deals as small as a $500,000
Hmm.
because it felt right for the seller, right? He said, hey, maybe I'm not going to take anything for the first 2 years. Okay, great. That money's just gonna, we're gonna let that
Accumulate.
sit there. And so it really depends on what their needs are after the fact and how much income they want to get out of it. We just want to make sure that it's suitable and it's gonna solve what they're trying to do. And then if it makes sense, all this stuff I always tell people should make common sense. If it doesn't, then we're doing something wrong here.
Okay. Before we get you out the door, I have one last final question on my allegedly three questions podcast here, Ben. You've been a great guest today. I really appreciate you making time for me. Are there any, based on your experience now, being doing this for decades, you've been working in this space, are there any common mistakes that someone who has already implemented the DST, they've come to you, you've advised them. Is there any common mistakes that you would want clients to avoid?
That's wow, that's a good question. I think the only issues that ever come up with a deferred sales trust are around the investments. So I would say, sometimes if people are maybe too aggressive and we go through some uh, uh, that's the only time they're unhappy is when the investments aren't performing and now the note is not fully secured, right? So we have this amortization schedule that's increasing or decreasing depending upon how much money they're taking. And then we have this portfolio of securities and maybe some other assets that's securing the note. Um, Making sure that those investments are going to create the income every month that we need, right? Because
Hmm.
we got to pay that note income every month typically. Um, but other than that, and I would, going back to one of our points was, you don't want somebody to do this that says, I'm going to need all the money in 2 years,
Yeah.
right? Or I'm going to need all the money to buy a new house. Well, this isn't the right deal for you. I mean, I've told many people, you know what, you should just pay the tax. Right. I'd much rather tell somebody to do something else than be unhappy in our structure. So, the only issues I've ever seen in all the years is people are unhappy with the investment returns. And, again, like you're helping them get through that often by saying, look, it's just a matter of time. The note payments are being made. So let's let that investment come back over time. And if we're in the right investments, that'll happen. So that would be the only issue. The other point that I just thought of too was interesting because you get a lot of real estate and business deals where you have more than one partner, right? So sometimes you'll have two or three, or sometimes we have a deal right now, a hotel on Sunset, $100 million deal with 100, I think, owners, limited partners and things like that. But when they sell this hotel, they're looking at $35 million in taxes. So each of them can do a deferred sales trust and have their own unique trust to their own, suitability. Um, but the other nice part is if you have, different owners in an asset, whether it's real estate or a business, three of them could go do a 1031 and one of them could do our structure.
Hmm.
So we can sever those partnerships and each party can do their own thing, which is really, really nice because a lot of times people say, you know what, I just want out of this thing. I don't want to be a limited partner or a partner in this one structure. I want to, I want to start creating more income. I want more flexibility. So that's another benefit I think that we see people really, really like. So, again, we start some of our deals in 1031s. So we're not opposed to 1031s. We're not opposed to Delaware. They just each have their place. And unfortunately, because the deferred sales trust is not common knowledge, a lot of people don't know about it. Once they find out about it, they really love it.
Well, I think we've done a little bit here to help with that. I mean, great conversation today, Ben. I'm really, really glad that I invited you to join us today. You exceeded my expectations in terms of the amount of information, education that you provided. Excellent, excellent guest, and appreciate the time you took to spend with us today. For the folks watching here today, been able to see your information on the screen, but if you're listening in, or folks that are listening in, it'd be great if you could share what is the best way, because I'm sure people are going to have questions now. I mean, I can't imagine they won't. So what is the best way for them to contact you?
Certainly, they can email me, Ben at dstadvisorsinc.com, or, our local number. I don't have our toll-free number memorized. That's horrible. But, our local number is 818-225-1091.
Well, lucky for me, I happen to have your 1-800 right in front of me here. It's 877-916-3686. So if you're listening in South Florida, New York, Seattle, Phoenix, Chicago, Dallas, give Ben a call.
Awesome. Wayne, thank you. I love what you're doing. The education part is such a value add for everybody. I think it's awesome. So thanks again for having me.
Thank you. And I want to thank you again to Calabasas, California-based Ben Levine. He is the president and COO of DST Advisors. Ben, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Wayne.
I look forward to bringing you the Three Questions podcast, and I hope you find them educational and informative. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to our podcast and YouTube channels. And to receive a notification as to when our latest episode has been posted, please click on the notifications bell. Now, lastly, to schedule an online consultation with me to discuss your wealth management needs, please click on the link in the description box below, www.onecapital.com/meet with Wayne. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.